Do you like your food? Yeah, my food's good. How does your food taste? My food tastes good. My food is a little spicy though. I like my food. My food isn't spicy. Hola Hola Mis Amores. What sounded weird about that whole interaction? Did anything sound a little annoying? Today's video is going to be talking about direct and indirect object pronouns. And we're going to kind of correct or fix and show you the importance of direct and indirect object pronouns so that we don't sound like that beginning interaction where we're saying my food, my food, my food, my food all the time. Before we jump into today's lesson, make sure you guys download the Unacademy app for lots of really fun, great lessons that take you literally 2 minutes a day. And it has a streak feature, so we all love those streaks. So make sure you download the Unacademy app for learning more Spanish. So a world without direct and indirect object pronouns would sound really uninteresting, annoying, and boring. That first interaction, I kept saying, do you like your food? Yes, I like my food. My food is spicy. I like my food, my food. I kept saying my food all the time. So direct and indirect object pronouns allows us to replace the nouns in the sentences so that we're not being annoying and repeating ourselves. In today's lesson, I will be teaching you how to use direct and indirect object pronouns so that you sound more fluid and native-like. Now, saying the words direct and indirect object pronoun might sound really confusing. You might be looking at me like, what does that word even mean? In simpler terms, direct or indirect object pronouns replaces a noun in a sentence. So jumping back to that awkward example I had at the beginning, if you're at a restaurant with your family and your dad says, do you like your food? You're most likely going to respond with, yeah, I like it. That it is referring to what? The food, okay? So that it is a direct object pronoun. It is replacing the noun of the food in a sentence, so we're not so repetitive all the time. So that we don't sound annoying and repetitive, we replace the food, the noun the food, with it, which sounds a lot more natural and fluid. So that's all object pronouns are. So what's the difference between direct object pronouns and indirect object pronouns? So how do you identify a direct object pronoun? Well, these are objects that directly receive the action of the verb. So in other words, it is directly receiving, the object is directly receiving the actions of the verb. So like saying, I see her, instead of saying, I see Maria. Both mean the same thing, right? But you're replacing her for Maria. The easiest way to identify direct object pronoun in a sentence is by asking yourself, who or what is receiving the action of the verb? Now, typically, it's pretty simple in that object, that thing, follows the verb. All right, so let's look at some examples. I'm going to show you sentences that are not using direct object pronouns, and then how it would look if we did use a direct object pronoun. So our first example, if I say, estoy llamando a mis padres. Estoy llamando a mis padres. I am calling my parents. Now, the direct object of that sentence is my parents. My parents are receiving the action of the call, right? I'm calling them. So if I were to replace and get rid of mis padres in a sentence and using a direct object pronoun, it would look a little something like this. Los estoy llamando. Los estoy llamando. I am calling them. Number 2. Ella está cuidando a mis hijos. She is taking care of my kids. So the direct object of that sentence is mis hijos, because they are receiving the action of being taken care of, like I'm taking care of them. So in order to change that sentence to use a direct object pronoun, you would say, ella los estoy cuidando. She is taking care of them. I want to make sure you guys have plenty of examples so that you can reference back to these and so it's not a confusing topic. So let's dive into example number 3. Yo leo un libro cada noche antes de ir a la cama. I read a book every night before going to bed. Now, what is the direct object of that sentence? El libro, because el libro is directly receiving the action of being read, like I'm reading the book. So in order to rewrite this exact same sentence, but using a direct object pronoun, you would say, yo lo leo cada noche antes de ir a la cama. I read it every night before going to bed. Número 4. No puedo recordar su número. Can't remember his or her phone number. So what's the thing they can't remember? Oh, right. The phone number. So the phone number, el número, is the direct object of the sentence. So in order to rewrite the sentence, you would say, no lo puedo recordar. No lo puedo recordar. I can't remember it. In our last example using direct object pronouns, ella tiene que escribir la carta. Ella tiene que escribir la carta. She has to write the letter. So what is the direct object? La carta, because it is directly receiving the action. Like I'm writing the letter, right? So to rewrite or re-say the sentence using direct object pronoun, you would say, la tiene que escribir. La tiene que escribir. She has to write it. So now that you've seen all these examples, let's dive into what the direct object pronouns are for each of the different subjects. Yo, me, tú, te, él, lo, ella, la, usted, lo, or la, nosotros, nos, vosotros, os, ellos, los, ellas, las, ustedes, los, or las. So I'm going to give you guys a sentence and I want you to identify what part of the sentence is the direct object pronoun. I think you guys can do it, no problem. Ellas me ayudan con mi carro. Ellas me ayudan con mi carro. They help me with my car. The me in this case is the direct object pronoun because the me is the direct object pronoun for yo, and I am directly receiving the help from my friends. Let's take a break and hop on the Unacademy app for the day. All right, let's do my lesson. It says translate. Near, cerca. Okay, it is near. Está cerca because we use a star with locations. Lejos far. Okay, it says translate to English. Lejos far. Está lejos. Okay, está cerca. It is near. Okay, the subway is near. El metro está cerca. Perfecto. All right, I have a picture of a bus and it wants me to translate it to say the bus is far. El autobús está lejos. All right, thanks for helping me complete my Unacademy lesson of the day. So enough with the direct object pronouns. Let's move on to indirect object pronouns. So how you can identify indirect object pronouns is by asking yourself to whom or for whom is an action being done. So in the following sentences, I want you guys to try to pick out what is the indirect object. So to whom or for whom is the action being done. Yo lavo el carro para mis padres. Yo lavo el carro para mis padres. I wash the car for my parents. So for whom or for who am I washing the car for? My parents, them. So in order to use this sentence using an indirect object pronoun, it would look something like this. Yo les lavo el carro. I wash the car for them. That les is the indirect object pronoun replacing mis padres. So now I'm going to give you a couple more examples where the indirect object pronoun is already in the sentence. For example, él siempre le compra flores. Él siempre le compra flores. He always buys flowers for her. In this sentence, the le is the indirect object pronoun referencing her. Ella le dio un regalo para su cumpleaños. Ella le dio un regalo para su cumpleaños. She gave him a gift for his birthday. The le in this case, in this sentence, is the indirect object pronoun because it's referencing who or for who the gift is. I know that kind of sounds weird. Who's the gift for? Him, le. All right, so we've seen it in context, we've seen it in examples. Let's dive into what each indirect object pronoun is. Yo, me, tú, te, él, ella, usted, le, nosotros, nos, vosotros, os, ellos, ellas, ustedes, les. So how do we use direct and indirect object pronouns in the same sentence? You might be looking at me like, well, why do I need to use them in the same sentence? Let me give you an example here in English. If I said, I gave it to her, that sentence right there is exactly how and why you would use direct object and indirect object pronouns in the exact same sentence. I gave it, direct object, to her, indirect object. So a wise teacher once taught me, people always come first. And you might be like, okay, what do you mean? When you're using direct and indirect object pronouns in the same sentence, the person always has to come first. So the indirect object pronoun. Because people are more important than material things. For example, yo te lo compro. I buy it for you. So as we see in the structure of the sentence, the te, the person, comes before the direct object, the item. And I know in English we say, I buy it for you, and it comes at the end. It just doesn't work like that in Spanish. People first. Always put the indirect object before the direct object. So you can see that the te comes before the lo because people are more important than things. So if this silly little tidbit that I gave you helps you remember the placement, great. A few more examples. Él nos lo compra. Él nos lo compra. He buys it for us. As you can see, the nos comes before the direct object because why? People first. Ella se lo compra. Ella se lo compra. She buys it for him or her. Hold up. Why did you just use say? This entire video, I've been following you and I'm like, yes, object and indirect object pronouns, I got it. But you just use say and you never mentioned that, Madison. Okay, let me explain. It really isn't that complex. So when you are using direct and indirect object pronouns in the same sentence, and you're using the direct or the indirect object, le or les, it automatically has to change to say if we are using it with a direct object that is lo or la, or los or las. So in that example, it said, ella se lo compra. So again, why do they do that? Why do they switch it up like that? Well, basically in Spanish, they don't like to have two similar sounds in a row. So again, if this sentence were rewritten without the say using the normal indirect le, again, which this is wrong, this is what it would sound like. And for Spanish speakers, it doesn't go well. Like the two sounds are too similar. So if we didn't use say, it would sound something like this. Ella le lo compra. Ella le lo compra. The le lo is too similar of sounds. So what do? They're like, let's just make it easy. We're not going to have any tongue twisters here. We're going to just change that le to say. So le or les changes to say anytime its direct object in the sentence is lo, la, los, or las. Give yourselves a big pat on the back because you guys just conquered the direct and indirect object pronouns. So as you could see from the beginning of this video, a world without direct and indirect object pronouns would be very annoying, honestly. So you guys know what to do now. Click that little notification button so you never miss a video with Everyday Español. And subscribe, share this channel with your friends because guess what? We need to add more people to our comunidad. I'll catch you next time on Everyday Español for more Spanish just like this. Adios.